In addition, another nanotechnology is iridescence in paint finishes, which we touched upon earlier. So these nanotechnologies they're exciting, and they allow us to do things that we could not have done 5 years ago. On this project, now I want to touch on adaptive technology. We think that the ideas for using metal don't have to come from the facade industry. So on this project, this is a project designed by Toyo Ito, and the project was, unfortunately, it was put on hold, and then now it's being redesigned. It went out for redesign because it was extraordinarily over budget. It was a very aggressive program. They've reduced the size of the museum. Although it's interesting, they could have just sold 2 pieces of the artwork in their collection and paid for the whole building, but I chose not to do that. So Ito's idea was brilliant. He wanted to use this egg crate idea where it's a load-bearing facade, and it was basically made of steel, 2 pieces of plate steel. So it was a 2-year adventure, going back and forth. One of the big challenges was that Ito-san wanted the wall thickness to be no thicker than 100 mm. It spans 7 meters, floor to floor. So 100 mm. Took us about 1.5 years. Finally, he accepted 125 mm because of fire testing. But it was 1.5 years. But beautiful design, and it works. The adaptive technology that we use is we met with 31 shipbuilders, bridge builders, large steel fabricators, because the idea of having to fabricate this in pieces on site with labor costs was prohibitive. So we were able to use shipbuilding technology and hydraulics to make panels that ultimately would have been 7 meters high by 20 meters long. And we were able to figure out a way to ship them to the site, ship them from the port to the project. So it's always exciting to be able to solve those kind of challenges. Another nanotechnology was same one we used on Uniglow, which is the ceramic composite coating. When we were first exploring the idea of this steel, we presented a sample of the plate steel with a 6 mm coating to increase, the fire rating. And so Ito took the sample, and he just tapped on the sample, and it didn't feel like, to him, it didn't feel like steel. So back to square one on the finish, because it didn't feel like steel. So he is absolutely a purist and a delight to work with. Challenging, but a delight. Fired facades. Thank you. The interrogation?
The interrogation. Thank you. That was very, very interesting. A purist, but a delight to work with.
Is that a contradiction? I don't think so.
Now, what is your relationship to architects?
It's usually it covers from being a collaborator. Some architects look at us as a collaborator. Some of us look at us as purely a technical resource. Because we're a consultant, we're an unbiased source of information. So they can rely on us to tell them the options and be straightforward about the risks and how to mitigate risks. And then if we're a collaborator, they may say, here's the idea and a charrette. And then we may say, well, what if? And we may put out 3 or 4 options. So, collaboration of technical and sometimes somewhere in between.
How often do they request you to interpret their ideas? And how often do they just want you to be executing their ideas?
I think it's changing, because I think as we do more collaboration, that feeds more collaboration. So I would say when we first started, because facade consulting is still in my view, is in its nascent stage. You know, it's still a very small area of practice. But I think as architects become more comfortable that we're not designing the building, we're helping support their concept. So the scale is more collaboration and less just pure technical. That's the trend.
Who is who? Could you give an example of one architectural practice where you are allowed to bring in all your knowledge and interpret what their vision?
That's a dangerous question.
You're in Sweden now, so it's no, Billy Chen is not here. We've actually been trying to get her to speak here, but
she would be.
Put in a good word for us.
Yeah, of course. Todd and Billy I think Todd and Billy are architects that view us as collaborators. I mean, they're brilliant architects, and they come up with wonderful ideas, but they do allow us to throw out ideas. Another one is Min Suk Cho. Before I came here, I was doing little hand sketches in the hotel room, very glamorous, and sending them different ideas on a very articulated facade for a resort. So I think those are two examples. An example of a purely technical client would be someone like Kohn Pedersen Fox, where they have a very strict regimen of their design and what they want, and so we're more on the technical side.
What do you prefer?
Well, I think, don't we all like collaboration or feel like we have a hand in something, right? I think that's what we prefer, but we understand. We have to gauge every project.
How do you manage to stay unbiased? I can imagine that producers approach you trying to get you to promote their material.
All the time. And it's interesting because we have a protocol inside the company where when we go out for samples, we don't name the project, we don't name the location. We only issue a project number for a couple reasons. One, the architects oftentimes, they have to work through different material options, and they don't want a frenzy of solicitation. And we understand that material suppliers are in the business to sell materials, but we want the architect to have the opportunity to look at a lot of options without having to sort through a lot of strategic marketing, if you will, of a different solution. So we're pretty careful about that. And what's happened is we've built up a level of trust with the clients where they appreciate that, and also suppliers know that we are unbiased. And so they view that more favorably, actually. And so now it's an accepted norm in our practice.
And when it comes to the prototyping, do you do that in-house?
Some, but mostly we do it outside. Because we have offices in different countries, it's difficult to replicate the requirements of prototyping, because facades encompass what we think are 4 categories of materials, and then there's lots of different variables. So no, we generally will go again with the project number, and we will pay the stipend or the cost to develop if it's not something that is a product offering. So, and then we also have libraries, and most of our offices, especially in emerging markets like India, ironically has the largest material library because the supply chain in India is not well established. So actually clients can come, the manufacturers' names are not on there, they're all coded, and they can look at all of the different materials, and then if they select them, we give them the information.
You're spread all over the world, it seems to me. I mean, you've...
About me personally?
No. You too, live in Shanghai.
I feel like that.
Live in Shanghai, live in part-time in California too, wasn't it? And you've got offices in California, that's the headquarters.
Headquarters is the U.S. I mean, it's kind of, our practice is East Coast, West Coast, and a little bit in between, so.
To put it straightforward, how many offices do you have and where?
We have 8 offices. Shanghai, Seoul, Korea, Mumbai, India, Istanbul, Riyadh, Dubai, New York, San Diego, San Francisco.
And you founded the company in 97?
I did, 1997, yeah. So we have about 85 to 90 practitioners. It's actually great fun because the architects that come right out of school, they come out of school. We have architects, engineers. I would say about 60% of our staff are engineers. The balance are architects and product designers. And it's great fun to see graduate architects come out of school and they can dive into, you know, a project and be involved in the project instead of drawing parapet details for 5 years in the back room of an architectural practice. So I mean, I think I would certainly encourage architects to look at facade architecture also, because it's a wonderful field.
I imagine your offices having a backyard which looks a bit like a churchyard, with a lot of different types of metals stuck into the ground like tombstones, and they're being there because you want to see how they old, you know, and how they age. And
it's not a very positive thing, tombstone. But we do have some tombstones. That's true. Actually, it makes great art. It makes great artwork. You know, I mean, sections.
Installation, yeah.
Yeah, sections of facades. We have a Rhine zinc roof mock-up in our San Diego office. I go by every once in a while and pet it. Remember the trauma of going through that with a client. So, yeah, it's the backstory again. So.
Where do you go to? Which branches do you go and find your ideas? I think you mentioned shipbuilding in connection with Toyoito. Car industry, NASA. What?
I don't know about NASA. Although the ceramic composite coating we were talking about, or I touched on, the nanotechnology, actually comes from the petroleum industry, where they obviously gas tanks and oil tanks, they like to keep them on the cooler side. So they developed this nanotechnology to coat these petroleum tanks, and that's actually the coating that's on the Uniqlo store in China. And when we told the Japanese why they should use this technology, because it reduces the solar radiation into the building, reflects the light in the light chamber, they didn't care if it came from the oil industry. So I think there's so many opportunities in a vast array of industries. So.
The Uniqlo project, was that one of the self-cleaning facades, so to speak?
No, it's the ceramic coating has a low coefficient of friction, so it rinses quite easily. But that one does not have the titanium oxide additive, because that is a unit painted building, and we wanted that building to be. It's in China, and frankly, the window washing and BMU maintenance is not very predictable, and so they bang into the buildings and they mark them up so that ceramic composite can be easily field repaired. So that was part of the criteria.
I'd like to let in the audience and so that you can ask a few questions as well. Do we have a microphone, Åsa?